Sustainable Building Week that we can share. And Annabelle, did you just start recording? Is that great? Awesome. So thanks so much. So just so everyone knows, if you have to jump early, we'll be recording today's presentation and we'll be sharing with folks as well as sharing the slides afterwards. But before I get too much started, I just want to jump into a little bit of our housekeeping. I know everyone's been on a lot of webinars so far, but just so everyone knows, please keep your microphone muted during our presentations. We will have a lot of time for dialogue afterwards. Please feel free to later unmute yourself and ask your questions, but during our speakers time, please make sure you're quiet. If you have any problems or issues hearing things, please chat our support person, Annabelle. Annabelle is the amazing research assistant for the San Diego Regional Climate Collaborative. We're very lucky to have them on our team and joining us today. Again, if you have any questions for speakers, we'll have time at the end. And just for folks so you're aware, we're going to be using the polling features that Zoom offers throughout today's presentation. So please be prepared to answer. And it's not a test, I promise, but you will, maybe be testing some of your knowledge. So excited to have you all here. So today's presentation would be nothing without our wonderful speakers. So, we're really excited to kind of bring together this idea of, advancing decarbonization strategies in San Diego. We know that lots of different cities and agencies are taking, a diverse suite of approaches to get us to that carbon neutral or carbon zero. So wanted to bring some of those speakers to you today to do a quick little round robin of what's going on around the county. So really thankful to have Chad Reese here from the County Regional Airport Authority, who's going to be talking about high performance and net zero energy buildings. Also joined by Colleen Wisniewski from the city of Chula Vista, talking about their commercial and multifamily benchmarking. And we'll go back up north to Crystal Nahara from the city of Encinitas to talk about building electrification ordinances, and then kind of move back south and central to talk to Lindsay Haas about from the city of San Diego on municipal energy strategies. So really full suite of ideas. Hopefully folks have their notepads ready. I know there's going to be a lot of really great projects that we'll share today. And again, just wanted to, thank everyone for being here today. The Climate Collaborative is really excited to partner with our friends at the Green Building, Sustainable Green Building for Sustainable Building Week. Supposed to happen in person last year, but now we're here virtual. So really glad to kick off that the annual event. We'll drop in the chat too if you haven't signed up for any of the other events. There's events throughout this whole week. I think there's 3 more today. I think we're kicking off Tuesday, but there's a couple of others on a range of topics all around, sustainable building. So if something else is your jam, totally encourage you all to join, and we will drop that link in the chat as well. Oh, and I clicked on it on accident. Can you still see my screen? Great. Well, this helps because I was going to jump here next, but just jumped out of the slides on accident. Wanted to also announce for those of you on the call who are maybe already familiar with the Climate Collaborative, and for those of you who aren't, we are actually celebrating our 10-year anniversary as an organization in the region. So just wanted to call it to attention, this was a really great timestamp for us and a milestone, and we're really excited to celebrate. So with funding from the San Diego Foundation, we actually pulled together a decade of impact report. So just wanted to bring that to everyone's attention. I'll share it with you all. We're really excited to, continue working in this space. So just wanted to give you a little preview. So we have, who we are, some, you can see our value. We've got some really great testimonials in here from familiar faces like Chad, who you'll hear from today, as well as you can see, these big changes we've made over time. We've also started to catalog, our history, where we came from, but just wanted to kind of highlight, where we're going and, where we'll be in the future. So really want to encourage folks to check this out and share pretty widely. But we're really, really happy for that. So thanks so much. I'm going to jump back over to our slides here and turn it over to Chad Reese from the San Diego Regional County Airport. So take it away, Chad.
Thank you, Darby. Thanks for the opportunity to present. We have a jam-packed panel here, lots of information. I'll bound mine to 5 minutes. So this is a very high-level overview of Airport Authority initiatives. So next slide, please, Darby. So, and you can advance a few slides or a few times, and we'll see these little pop-ups. San Diego International Airport is a 51-gate large hub airport that in 2019 served over 25 million passengers. It's the busiest single runway airport in the US. It's confined to a humble 661 acres. And pre-COVID, we're expecting a 50% passenger growth by 2035. I left that number in here because although the current context shows a significantly diminished traffic, we are looking at long-term projections. And cargo has really done a significant lift in terms of airport operations within the last year. Next slide. One of the biggest opportunities in front of us is the redevelopment of Terminal 1. Anyone who's flown through San Diego knows that Terminal 1 amenities are a little to be desired. It's a 50-year-old asset. And so we are at a unique opportunity to really develop an asset that will most likely be with us for the next 4 or 5 decades. So we're spending an inordinate amount of time on program definition documents and other strategic goals in order to get the most high performance building we can that's going to stand the test of time and be able to provide us a lower energy use intensity, dramatically lower than our current terminal. So next slide. At the Airport Authority, over the last 8 years, we have achieved 16 unique environmental certifications. And these really help guide and influence how we pursue new construction projects. These are all new construction certifications. I won't talk about operations and maintenance at the moment, but you can see in the third column from the left, the different certification types that we've pursued with different projects. You can see LEED comprises the bulk of that, but we're also involved in Envision and Park Smart, different civil-oriented certifications. And we're also experimenting with, we're piloting the new Rely project from USGBC, which is really all about resilience. So next slide. And go one more, please, Darby, if you could. And the framework that helps guide our decisions internally, separate from those certifications I just mentioned, is a sustainability management program at the Airport Authority that comprises 7 unique plans: Clean Transportation Plan, Carbon Neutrality Plan, Climate Resilience Plan, Zero Waste Plan, Biodiversity Plan, a Water Stewardship Plan, and a Strategic Energy Plan. All of these plans are board accepted documents, and they really help drive the process of stakeholder engagement at the authority. Next slide. One more, please. Actually, go one more. So in the context of this webinar, carbon neutrality really defines the airport's long-term aspirational goals for greenhouse gas and particulate reductions on 2 fronts: either airport authority controlled emissions or the emissions in which the authority can only guide or influence. The graphic below, if you add those numbers up, the authority direct control is 1% to 2% of overall emissions. So the vast majority is aircraft taking off, ground transportation. So there's a lot of work to be done there. But I'm going to dwell for a moment on authority controlled emissions on the next slide. And go one more, please. So what this demonstrates is it's a graph of carbon reductions through 2040, described by the different scopes, scope 1, 2, and scope 3. The dotted lines represent internal and external reductions. So we are able to leverage the state of California long-term goals, which gets us quite a bit way to our goals. But then we also work on emissions reductions for grid delivered electricity, so assets, buildings, and things like that. We do have a long-term goal of 80% below 2015 levels by 2035. Next slide, please. And please go 3 more. There you are. So if you look at authority controlled emissions, we're really talking about on-site renewable electricity and batteries, grid delivered renewables that I mentioned, either eco-choice or the new San Diego Community Power, which the authority is scheduled to be opted into in the June timeline. High performance facilities, which really speaks to that slide that I mentioned earlier with LEED and others. We focus on alternative fuel equipment, and we do have a fleet of 100% alternative fuel vehicles at the airport. Next slide. And one more, please. There you are. So the strategic energy plan really helps us guide conversations, if you will, around electricity generation assets, batteries, storage, photovoltaic, solar, and also what we can do in terms of energy efficiency measures, ASHRAE audits, that type of thing. What you can see in the chart below is within the next few years, we plan on adding quite a bit more photovoltaic, solar, and another battery storage system. Next slide. And where we are currently is we have 5.5 megawatts of on-site PV solar. And we're also in the process of commissioning a 2 megawatt, 4 megawatt hour battery storage system that'll be coming online in the next few months. So these together, they provide resilience in terms of on-site PV, and the storage is really set up for us to really shave the peaks in our, reduce our demand charges, et cetera. Next slide. This is my last slide. I'm running a little long, but really what I want to leave this group with today is sustainability at the airport really comes from the top down. Here you see the president, CEO, and some select board members really demonstrating that sustainability comes from the top down as well as driven from the bottom up. And we meet somewhere in the middle, and we use our strategic plans to help really guide and influence our long-term strategies to achieve carbon reductions now and into the future. And with that, Darby, I will end my presentation and hand the mic over.
Yeah, thanks so much, Chad. Really appreciate that. And I think while we transition over to our next speaker, we actually have a polling question for folks. So thank you, Annabelle, for launching that. So hopefully folks were paying attention. I will flag Chad wrote this question, so he really wanted to make sure you were. So please feel free to answer that one. We'll see how those come in as we get ready for Colleen. So we'll just give this another minute. I'm also realizing I maybe set this poll up incorrectly, that this was a multiple choice, not a multiple select. So as long as you get one of them right. So I know Chad gave me the right answer. So Annabelle, we can end that poll here. So it looks like folks were paying attention that there was a lot of LEED certifications. And is it the WELL certification, Chad, is the only one the airport has not yet received?
That's right, but we do use it to guide and influence, how we approach the social measures at the airport, among other plans.
Great, thanks so much. And Annabelle, we can close that poll, and we'll turn it over to our next speaker here, Colleen Wisniewski from the city of Chula Vista.
Good morning, everyone. Yes, I'm Colleen Wisniewski, Environmental Sustainability Manager with the City of Chula Vista, and wanted to tell you all about our newly approved multifamily and commercial energy benchmarking and conservation ordinance, quite a long title. It was approved by City Council in March of this year. So I believe we have, look at that, it's already going. We already have a poll up there. So hopefully some of you are familiar with it. It looks like Many are, but not everyone. So I'll tell you a little bit about benchmarking basics and how this ordinance helps us reach some of our climate action plan goals. So I think once we're ready, we can move on to the next slide. Awesome. So city staff are currently implementing the council approved 2017 climate action plan. And one goal of note is regarding a target of retrofitting 20% of multifamily and commercial space to achieve a 50% savings in energy by 2035. And our CAP also mentions policies regarding building performance reporting and public disclosure, and also calls for staff to develop a residential and commercial energy conservation ordinance. And so that's all kind of wrapped up into this newly approved ordinance. We can go to the next slide and I'll tell you a little bit more. So for those that are not familiar, perhaps, buildings account for around 40% of energy consumed in the US. And a few years ago, California Assembly Bill 802 was enacted and requires building owners of large commercial and multifamily buildings to benchmark energy use annually to the California Energy Commission. One of the interesting things is AB 802 also provides for local control, and other cities in California have created their own ordinances, like the cities of Berkeley, Los Angeles, and San Diego, among others. And building performance ordinances have been around for around 15 years and are a best practice for many cities across the US. There's around 30 cities across the US that have their own local ordinances. We can go to the next slide, please. So for those that aren't familiar, benchmarking is a process of measuring a building's energy consumption and rating a building's performance, and allows comparison to similar buildings. And by tracking the progress annually, it allows the owner to address issues and make improvements on past performance. And another part of benchmarking is the disclosure to the public, making building performance visible and to both building occupants and potential tenants. And just by the act of benchmarking and not even investing in any upgrades, the average building sees an improvement in energy use over time. And you've probably heard the saying, you can't manage what you can't measure. So that's especially true for energy efficiency in large buildings. So we'll move to the next one. So benchmarking basics, the most common tool for benchmarking energy usage is the US EPA's Energy Star Portfolio Manager platform. And that's where building owners can register their buildings there. The first time of setting up a buildings account, oh, look, we've got another poll going. Look at that, you guys are on it. So I'm wondering, yes, it's interesting to see as our results pop in, who's already benchmarking. So we'll kind of let that keep going as I speak here. So the first time of setting up a buildings account, there'll be some basic information about building square footage, maybe the number of employees or occupants, hours of operation, type of building, like if it's retail or a grocery store. And then building owners will also include a link to their SDG&E account information. So that information can be input directly from SDG&E. So look, we're kind of at a mix there of folks that know if you're benchmarking or not. So that's very interesting. Once all the data has been entered in Portfolio Manager, it calculates an Energy Star score between 1 and 100, which allows for easy comparison of similar building types and sizes. For example, if a building gets a score of 15, it's performing better than just 15% of similar buildings, which means that there's a 85% of buildings are performing better than that building. So there's a lot of opportunity for improvement. And as part of this ordinance, building owners will still report through Portfolio Manager. And there's just a last thing that they click at the end to share that data with the city. So there's no double reporting needed. So we can move on to the next one. Interesting to see. We kind of have a mix of replies there on how folks are benchmarking or not their buildings here locally. So let's see here. So if we look at the buildings in Chula Vista, we have a lot of opportunity, and each city is very different in their kind of mix of buildings. We have about 360 buildings that would currently be covered by the state version of the benchmarking, but we have a lot of buildings that are much smaller as well. So we wanted to target what made sense for Chula Vista. So we don't have, we have more buildings in the 20,000 square foot to 50,000 square foot range than we do for really large buildings. So we brought the threshold down so that we're covering buildings that are 20,000 square feet and larger with this ordinance. So this will allow us to really target a lot of those large buildings in our city. And having this snapshot of our buildings will enable us to design future programs directed to specific sectors that might need more assistance with energy efficiency work. So it's sometimes hard to get the data and know what kind of buildings we have. So this ordinance allows us to know much more what's going on in Chula Vista, so we can really help those building owners. Next slide, please. And this ordinance is designed as a reach code and goes, like as I just mentioned, it goes beyond AB 802 requirements. And it really helps us hit those targets that are listed in our climate action plan. And while some buildings will make steady improvements over time, others don't. And then we end up with a cohort of inefficient buildings that are not improving and really contributing to our greenhouse gas emissions here in the city. And building performance ordinances take the next step with additional requirements if buildings are not showing improvement. And I'll go into this in a moment, but three main ways we tackle this are with audits, retro commissioning, and then requiring specific measures to be taken if buildings aren't performing. So I think the next slide kind of starts going into specifically what's going on, and you can click a couple more times. There are a few. Yep, I think that's it. Oops, sorry. We'll go back one. Ooh. Yep, there you go. Sorry. So under our new ordinance, all commercial buildings over 20,000 square feet will need to benchmark their energy use in Portfolio Manager and disclose that information to the city annually starting in 2022, so next year. And buildings with an Energy Star score below 80 that do not meet performance targets over 5 years of benchmarking will need to undergo an audit and potential retro commissioning. Kind of depends on where they land on that. And then for those buildings with an Energy Star score below 65 that do not meet the minimum improvement requirements after 10 years of benchmarking, will need to apply the measures listed in their audit that are cost effective at the 10-year mark. So it gives folks a lot of time to get there. It does require them to make improvements. Next slide goes a little bit more into multifamily, and I think there's one or two more clicks. Yep, one more. So in our multifamily buildings, very similar. So again, annually, they'll need to start reporting in tenant spaces for buildings that are built before 2006, one-time cost-effective measures in tenant spaces like LED lighting, attic insulation, and all of that. And then in common areas with a common significant common load is very similar to the thing I just mentioned for our commercial buildings. So those buildings that have a low score will do an audit after 5 years. And then if after 10 years, they still have a score below 65, they'll need to make some improvements when cost effective. So we can go to the next slide. So a lot of benefits of this ordinance for sure. Reducing greenhouse gas emissions of existing commercial and multifamily buildings, helping lower the cost for building owners for operating those buildings, hopefully giving them more operating budget. One of the big things, improving our building stock in Chula Vista and really having that data to help us tailor programs for those building owners. And then as we start rolling into our CCA, what that Chad mentioned a moment ago with San Diego Community Power, this may help create future programs within that program to help really target our local buildings. Next slide, please. Staff are creating a dashboard here where the energy use can be tracked. And we're going to be doing a pilot program this year if all the things line up so that we can look at a small group of buildings this year, really get our feet under us so that when we start collecting actual data in 2022, it's going to be ready to go, and building owners and tenants and potential folks buying those buildings can log in and kind of see visually what these buildings look like. So next slide, just a final recap of our ordinance. We're really excited to have had council approval for this in March and really excited to start rolling this out. We've been in touch with other folks that have benchmarking ordinances, including folks at the City of San Diego, have been very helpful in answering lots of our questions, and I'm sure we'll have many more questions as we roll through the next year or so. So with that, I'll pass it back to Darby for our next speaker.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Colleen. So yeah, we'll welcome Crystal Nahara. I think She's going to get her slide queued up there. So thanks, everyone. And as a reminder, we'll have some time at the end for a really robust dialogue and Q&A. But as folks are going through their presentations, if anything comes to mind, feel free to drop it in the chat so that question isn't lost, and we'll get back to it. So thanks, everyone. And take it away, Crystal.
All right. Thank you, Darby, and nice to see everyone today. I'll be talking about building decarbonization that is occurring in the city of Encinitas. If my slides were, okay, great. And so this slide shows you a pie chart from our most recent climate action plan that the City Council has adopted, and it shows you kind of the breakdown of where our emissions are coming from. And I wanted to start with this slide just to kind of give you a backdrop of kind of what we're trying to improve. So most of our emissions come from transportation, the majority, a little over 50%, and then about almost 40% comes from natural gas and electricity combined, and that's really our building stock, and that's kind of in line with some other cities have mentioned here today. In that year, 2012, we had close to 500,000 metric tons of carbon dioxide emitted in our city. So we're trying to reduce that. And what I'll focus on today really is those three large sectors that I mentioned. I'll start here with electricity because that's really where we've done the most in terms of reducing emissions related to the cap measures that we built into our climate action plan. So we've got two measures related to electricity. One is to establish a community choice energy program. And this may seem like not the right forum to do this in the, when we're talking about building decarbonization, but what we're really trying to do with this new community choice energy program is reduce the amount of emissions through renewable energy that goes onto our grid. And that grid that then feeds our buildings with the greater renewable proportion of electricity. And so that's really why I included it here, is because we're kind of decarbonizing before the electricity even gets to the buildings, which is really exciting. The building occupants, in a way, don't even have to do anything, and they'll be eventually served with 100% renewable energy. The program is already beginning to be launched. We're in phase 1, which is delivering electricity to municipal customers. And then eventually by kind of this time next year, all customers will be online. And for our city, Encinitas, we've actually adopted a requirement here that when customers are opted in, they'll actually be opted into the top tier, which is 100% renewable energy. And if they want to voluntarily, they can then opt down to the 50% tier or opt back to SDG&E. So we're really excited that we're going to be decarbonizing our electricity sourced to our customers very quickly here in our city. And then the other measure related to electricity that we're currently working on, it's under development, is requiring certain all new commercial buildings and then certain retrofits to install solar on the rooftops. And that ordinance is currently under development, and we're hoping to get that to council sometime this summer for adoption. And then moving on, if my clicker here works, which seems like it's not. Oh, of course it jumped too far ahead. Let's try that again. Okay, so now let's go to transportation. And again, this may seem odd that I'm talking about transportation, but it does relate to buildings in that if you've got an electric vehicle, the place where it gets charged is at a building. It's the building's power that also powers then your car. So we've actually already adopted an ordinance that addresses residential EV charging and commercial EV charging. We require EV charging for all new residential, whether it's single family or multifamily. And then for commercial, it's again, all new, and then just certain retrofit commercial buildings that come in for permits. So we've got these requirements now on the books for a permit through our permit requests, and it's in our building code. And that's one way where we're also looking at decarbonizing through buildings. And then the natural gas piece of our pie, we're tackling in a couple of different ways. One, on the residential side, we've got two measures. One, looking at making our residential buildings more energy efficient. We're focused on retrofitting our existing buildings here. When folks come in for a permit, certain types of buildings will be requested to become more energy efficient to get their permits. And then on kind of with new buildings, what we're looking at is requiring certain buildings to become more electrified depending on the different appliances. Both of these measures are under development. The code requirements are under development, and we're looking to get those to council by sometime this summer. For this pie chart here at the bottom, two pie charts in one slide here, the bottom pie chart shows kind of where natural gas is being used in the residential setting. So most of it is either through space heating or through water heating. So those are a couple of the appliance types that we'll be potentially looking at electrifying through this ordinance. And then lastly here, we'll go to the commercial component of natural gas. And again, here we're similarly looking at making commercial buildings more energy efficient, and then also electrifying our commercial buildings through an ordinance. For the energy efficiency side, the ordinance would be applicable to all new commercial buildings and then certain retrofits of a certain size. And then for electrification, we'd be looking at all new commercial buildings that would be looking for permits in our city. And down here, this graph shows roughly kind of where the natural gas use is in commercial buildings. So largely cooking is kind of the highest use, and then space heating and water heating after that. So we're trying to tackle a lot with one large ordinance here, and this is our public process to get that ordinance eventually to City Council. We're kind of midway through this process. We've completed this public workshop here up at the beginning, and also just recently conducted a couple of stakeholder work group meetings, and that was kind of our comments gathering phase, and we're taking those comments in right now and using it to develop an ordinance that combines all 5 of these different measures into one request to council to incorporate these requirements into our building code. And then once we have this drafted, we're going to take this to another public workshop and offer another public comment period. If there's comments that we receive that seem to make sense to work into our draft language, we'll do so. And then take the final ordinance to our environmental commission with a request that they recommend that City Council adopt the requirements. And so again, we're hoping that we can accomplish all this in the next few months and get something on the books by summertime to start getting more decarbonization happening in our Encinitas buildings. And with that, I'll just leave you with one last slide, which is if I'm always happy to take any emails if you're interested in further information, or you can go on our website, and if you search /green building, you'll find all the information related to this current effort that we're working on. And that wraps it up for me. I'll stop sharing.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Crystal. And we just have one polling question as we transition to our last but not least speaker. So is your agency or organization actively taking steps to achieve building decarbonization? Just want to flag that for folks. And I will, great, looks like a lot of people are, so I'm excited. And for those who said no, maybe some of this will be inspiring for you. For our last speaker, I'll turn it over to Lindsay Hawes from the City of San Diego to talk about their municipal building decarbonization efforts. So Lindsay, feel free to take it away.
Hi, thank you. Can you hear me? Great, and can you see my screen?
Yep, looks good.
Okay, cool. Awesome. Well, thanks for joining everybody this morning, and thanks to the Climate Collaborative for a chance to present on this panel today. I'm going to talk a little bit about the efforts to decarbonize the City of San Diego's municipal building portfolio. So I'm going to be speaking specifically to work on city facilities, not necessarily work that we're doing out in the community, which mirrors a lot of the great work that the other panel members here have been presenting on all morning. But as far as the City of San Diego's municipal portfolio goes, over the last couple of years, we've been busy primarily with planning. We've been putting together our municipal energy strategy. This document went to City Council last fall, late last summer, and it was really the first step in trying to develop a comprehensive plan to get our city facilities to zero emissions. Development of this municipal energy strategy and a complementary implementation plan was directed by the Climate Action Plan, which was drafted back in 2015. So it's taken us a few years to get here, but with our municipal energy strategy, we kind of outlined some high-level priorities for ourselves that will guide us as we work towards the zero emissions goal and work towards reducing energy use and greenhouse gas emissions across our city portfolio, which is relatively large. We've got over 550 occupied facilities, everything from recreation centers to fire stations to museums and parks. So quite a few facilities out there, a lot of low-hanging fruit and a lot of opportunity to deploy the strategies that you're looking at on the screen right now, everything from energy efficiency and building management tools like building automation systems. We want to deploy a citywide enterprise BAS. Pretty excited about that. Obviously, installing renewable energy to help offset whatever we can't reduce through efficiency. Striving for zero emissions. I'm going to talk a little bit on my next slide about development of a zero emissions policy that we're working on specifically for city facilities and an electrification policy. Resiliency is our fourth strategy. We want to make sure that we can remain operable and continue to serve our communities when the grid goes down, as we know is happening with more frequency in the last couple of years and probably will continue to increase in frequency. And then our last strategy is around engagement and education, making sure that we're sharing the good work that we're doing and really leveraging the projects that we implement to train the local workforce. If we can leverage installation of battery storage projects, for example, and partner with agencies that can bring the local workforce to our job sites and leverage them to make sure that these technologies can be proliferated across the city, across the region, across the world. We want to be able to take advantage of those opportunities. So now that the strategy has been developed and published per the Climate Action Plan direction, we're working on development of the next step, which is our implementation plan. This is a much deeper dive with a lot more detail around specific energy project opportunities. So again, everything from efficiency to renewables to resiliency strategies like microgrids and battery storage. And we're breaking those down by asset type so that we can provide that information to, for example, the library department to say, okay, across all of our 35 libraries at the city, here are the different opportunities that that we've identified as ready to roll, and hope that we can work with the library department, for example, to implement some of those over the next 15 years. Energy policies is another big focus in our implementation plan. As I mentioned before, the zero emissions municipal building policy is where we're focusing a lot of effort right now. We set this goal for ourselves to get to zero emissions, and so we want to reduce consumption. We want to offset as much as we can with on-site renewables because we think that PPAs and other on-site installations can be cost-effective and perhaps help us save some costs, energy costs. But we also know that thanks to San Diego Community Power, whatever we can't offset on-site, we'll be able to procure from the grid and eventually with 100% renewables. So we're super excited to take advantage of that new resource. And then the last major section of the implementation plan is energy programs. And this is just really us saying, look, these are the areas where we want to focus as we implement these projects. So obviously electrification, the resiliency element. Equity is a big focus for us here as well. We want to make sure that we're deploying these clean energy projects in our communities of concern and bringing these clean energy resources to the communities that need them most. And I think there's a nice tie-in with resiliency there. And then funding and financing is another big area that we want to make sure folks know where we're headed. Energy savings performance contracts is kind of the biggest focus for us in terms of financing right now. Actually, the last couple of months, early this year, we took a proposal to City Council to amend our municipal code to allow us to pursue energy savings performance contracts using the design build procurement model, meaning that we can partner with ESCOs or energy service companies from start to finish. We can work with energy service companies to develop full comprehensive energy projects, everything from efficiency to renewables to battery storage, whatever it might be, whatever technologies are good fits for our facilities. The ESCO pays for the project upfront. We lock in energy savings, energy reduction guarantees in our contracts with the ESCOs, and then we use the resulting energy cost savings to pay back the project costs over a specified financing term. The ESCO sticks around, monitors the savings, maintains our equipment, whatever gets installed. And we're really excited to leverage this tried and true approach for energy projects that's been implemented by local governments and the state and school board, other entities like us for the last several decades. This is a little more detail on the ESPC process and timeline. We're on step 2 right now, and we're getting ready to hire a third-party owner's rep, someone, a consulting firm with expertise in working through the ESCO model to really hold our hand and make sure that we're tapping into all the best practices associated with that model. And we're thinking that maybe by Q3 of fiscal year 23, so like 2 years from now, we could actually have some ESCOs doing some construction projects and installing some clean energy technologies in our facilities. It's going to take a while to work our way through this process and check all the boxes of the city, but we're going to get there, and we're hoping to achieve that 2035 zero emissions municipal facility goal. And that's it for me. And my email is on the slide in case anyone wants to reach out to me afterward. Happy to answer any questions, and I'll turn it back to Darby.
Thanks so much, Lindsay. And just for folks, we launched one more poll. This is also, if you answer yes to this, please contact Lindsay. I know sharing those best practices and ideas is really helpful, especially with this group. So this is a very forward ask of, if you say yes, also please follow up with Lindsay, and her email is there for you as well. So thanks to all of our speakers. I am going to actually turn it over to SDRCC's research assistant, Annabelle, to moderate our Q&A. Again, if you have questions, either drop them in the chat and or feel free to use the raise hand function, and Annabelle can call on you to unmute yourself and ask your questions. So Annabelle, back to you.
Yeah, as Darby said, feel free to put any questions that you have in the chat or raise your hand. I will be starting first with a question from Corey Downs, sent during Crystal's presentation. This is for Crystal. Do you know if your EV codes are similar to the model EV codes used in Northern California?
Ooh, that's a good question. I don't. I'll have to look into that. Generally, what our EV codes require is for residential, for single family and two family dwellings. You need to be EV ready. So you need to have all the wiring and conduit capable of installing a level 2 charger in the garage or near the garage area of your home. And then for multifamily, the requirement is to have at least 15% of the total number of parking spaces for your dwelling to be actually equipped with EV chargers. And then on the commercial side, the requirement is for all new commercial, and then retrofits of, it's a requirement for either additions or alterations of greater than 10,000 square feet, that they are required to install 8% of their parking spaces with charging stations. So that's, I'll have to check to see if it's related to or similar to Northern California, but that's what we have adopted.
Awesome. And it seems like Corey might have a follow-up question.
Yeah, no, thank you very much for sharing your code. The green building link is really great, Crystal.
Okay.
I'm not as familiar with these, but I did see the Peninsula reach code, EV reach code. I thought was interesting because it requires the same levels of level 2, but then it also requires after you reach that limit, each remaining dwelling unit shall be provided with a level 1 EV ready space, which I
Oh.
thought was really interesting because that's something that we've heard from some of our developers is the level 2 charging can be really expensive. And so I thought that reach code was really interesting because it kind of provides a lower cost option to provide charging.
Yeah, that is a good idea.
Yeah. But
And
thanks
for
for the link,
overnight
that's very good.
charging, level 1 would be just fine for in most cases. That's a good idea.
All right. While other people are getting their thoughts, seems like Mike has a question for Colleen. Do you provide a list of cost-effective measurements to improve Energy Star ratings, and can they use on-site generation instead of energy efficiency?
Usually the cost-effective measures will be coming for the. All right, so let me talk. So multifamily, there's a list for tenant spaces for things that folks can do. So that's sort of a pre-made list for those folks that after 5 years of benchmarking that are still having a low score, the audit is what will they're required to do. And that will be the list that's generated specific to that building about what's effective or cost effective and what's not. I don't believe we have on-site generation as an option. That's a good question.
Corey has a question. I know it is out of the airport's control, but any updates on low carbon plane fuel options? I think that was directed at you, Chad.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, Corey, it is out of our direct control, but it is within the realm of our, influence, so we can help guide and influence. There's a lot of work in the state of California around sustainable aviation fuel. It's basically the same constituents as, say, renewable diesel. It's the same stock. There is a growing usage of sustainable aviation fuel. Seattle, LAWA, SFO, they're all starting to blend very token amounts at this point because there's just not enough supply. But planes are starting to be flown on with a portion of sustainable aviation fuel. In San Diego, the airport derives its jet fuel via the Kinder Morgan pipeline, which comes from the LA basin. So really what we're working on is NREL has done infrastructure studies on the most viable options for blending, and most likely those will happen not at the refinery, but some sort of blending facility that's not at the airport. One, we don't have the space. Two, it's just not as cost effective to blend on site. So what we're doing is we're working on trying to figure out how we could influence integration of more SAF at the pipeline, which delivered to 10th Avenue Marine Terminal, and then under the runway to our fuel racks on the other side. So it's that's one aspect. It's a long story, but we are tracking what's happening in the realm of electric airplanes right now. Short distance prop planes are the most viable for electrification, just due to the capacity of batteries and the weight that adds. You're not going to see batteries in your 737 anytime soon. But in short, we are working on a lot of different fronts to at least stay engaged and advocate for things like sustainable aviation fuel and the low carbon fuel standard. Hope that helps.
All right. I have a question for Lindsay regarding the zero emissions municipal building policy. What challenges do you anticipate rolling out across the city's portfolio of existing municipal buildings?
Yeah, good question, Annabelle. Thank you. Pools are going to be tricky. I don't think there are any really viable technologies right now for heating municipal pools with electric fuel, with electricity. So that's going to be tricky. We're anticipating a little bit of pushback from some of our stakeholders, potentially like the fire department, for example. We have had some interesting conversations with some fire department reps around renewable energy, and we're not exactly sure what the cooking habits are of our fire station and some of our other stakeholders, whether they really love their gas stoves or not. So yeah, I think, you know, we have a lot of really strong buy-in from our mayor. We have a lot of strong buy-in from our engineering and capital projects team, and they're the folks that typically design and bid out the work around construction of new facilities and major retrofits to existing facilities. But yeah, I think with their help and with some clear direction for them and some good guidance around the viable technologies and you know, solutions to achieve electrification, I think we'll be in pretty good shape. I'm interested to see too how the ESCO model and working with ESCOs how far we can get in retrofitting our existing facilities, especially. I noted Luke, it looks like, made a comment about heat pump pool heaters are okay, cool. Well, we'll check into that. We actually are trying to apply this zero emissions goal to the retrofits that we're going to pursue in partnership with ESCOs to the first phase of around 50 buildings that we want to retrofit using the ESCO model. There are no pools included in that list of facilities. So we're going to try and learn what we can from phase 1, and maybe we'll see Carlsbad has a passive solar heating on its pool complex. Very cool. Thank you, Mike. Maybe we'll reach out to you guys for some additional resources and share that with our teams.
Awesome. I have another question for Colleen, just kind of along the same vein of what were some considerations when you were considering your ordinance?
Yeah, so one of the first things we did was we looked at our climate action plan, figured out what were goals that could potentially be covered by this or what made sense. So that's why we identified those first couple of items with some of those main ones. And then it's kind of daunting at that point. Then we looked at our existing building stock, and if you just look at the state's ordinance, with it being over 50,000 square feet and above, it's a fair amount of Chula Vista buildings, but it's certainly not a lot of our buildings. So we wanted to investigate, you know, bringing that threshold down. And I think one of the biggest things we did, and thanks to our amazing consultant that helped with this, with all the research, was what are other cities doing around the country? And why, when something kind of struck a chord with us, why did those people or why did those cities choose certain things in their similar ordinances? And then we reached out and asked questions. Why did you do it this way? What are some problems you had? So really reaching out when we kind of started zeroing in on things and finding out why they made decisions and how is that working and what issues are they having. And so all of those things and many more were kind of combined into helping craft this. And to be fair and honest, and now that this is passed and I can say it in the public, we kind of aimed high and asked for everything we wanted and didn't think we were going to get it. And we pretty much got it, which is amazing. So now we're really excited, but also, again, overwhelmed with how are we going to roll this out. But really glad that this first reporting date will be next year. And like I said, we're trying to do a pilot project this year with a handful of buildings to make sure we have our ducks in a row so that when this goes out to several hundred buildings next year, that we're ready for it. Thanks.
Awesome. I'm going to turn it back to Darby as we're closing out here. So Darby, take it away.
Awesome. Thanks, Annabelle, and thanks, everyone. Really glad to see so many faces. Thanks so much for participating in the dialogue, and a really special thank you to all 4 of our speakers for being here today and donating their time. I will flag, Jeremy left a comment about pools in the chat. So it's definitely getting to be summertime on the horizon here, I think. So hoping everyone has a really, great and relaxing week. I will also drop in the chat just one more time for those of you who haven't yet checked out our Decade of Impact report for the Climate Collaborative. Please take a moment to look through it. I know many folks on this call have been participants within the Climate Collaborative over the years. So we really appreciate you continuing to show up even in this virtual space. And so we'll make sure that everyone who registered has a copy of the slides and the recording if you want to watch it again because you loved it so much. But so thank you all again so much. And if you have any questions, as always, please feel free to contact myself and or I know the speakers included their contacts as well. So, please follow up with them if you have any insights. And with that, please have a great rest of your week and day. And, again, participate in the rest of the other Sustainable Building Week webinars. So thanks everyone so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks all.
See ya.